While setting up the wedding room, I found a black lace panty in the bed seam. This panty clearly did not belong to me. I decided to call Michael Sue, who was working late, to clarify the situation, even though he usually doesn't answer calls when he is at work. To my surprise, he picked up quickly. He said, "Sorry, it might be mine. Just throw it away." The person who answered the phone was Sarah Sue, Michael's secretary. I realized that there would be no future between Michael and me. "Hello? Is this Michael? What's going on with those things found in the seam of our wedding room bed?" I dialed the number, rubbed my temples, and tried my best to keep my voice calm. There was an uneasy silence on the other end of the line. Just when I thought he didn't know how to respond, a young, clear female voice suddenly spoke up. "I'm sorry, it might be mine. Just go ahead and throw it away." I recognized that voice. It was Sarah, Michael's secretary. My heart sank instantly, and my voice turned cold. "Where's Michael? Let him take the call." Sarah hesitated for a moment, looked up in a certain direction, and a trace of satisfaction crept into her tone. "He's working overtime. What else could he be doing? Is there anything I can help you convey?" Just as I was about to speak, Michael's voice came through on the line. "Sarah, can you pass me my bathrobe?" In that moment, I was taken aback, not knowing how to react. I could only grip my phone tightly, preparing to question him. But before I could say anything, he hurriedly ended the call, leaving behind a silence. I stood still, staring at the underwear in my hand, then glanced around at the bright red decorations in the wedding room, and a wave of anger and disappointment surged within me. In the end, I tossed the underwear into the trash bin. Tomorrow is our wedding day, yet Michael chose this crucial moment to check into a hotel with his secretary. What on earth is he thinking? I took a deep breath and sent Michael a message. "Let's cancel the wedding, I don't want to go through with it." Then I began to pack my things, getting ready to leave this once beloved home that now felt so ironic. I never expected that my excitement for marriage would turn into this. After organizing everything, I realized I had so few belongings left. A single large suitcase could hold all my memories. I carried the suitcase and took one last look at the seemingly festive yet absurd wedding apartment. Closing my eyes, tears welled up in my eyes. It would be a lie to say I wasn't sad. What girl doesn't dream of her wedding day? But now, feelings no longer have any meaning. After returning home, I turned off my phone and blocked out all external messages. I opened a bottle of wine and drank alone until midnight. The alcohol numbed my nerves, allowing me to temporarily forget the pain, and I eventually fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, the sound of the doorbell woke me up. I had a terrible headache and groggily opened the door, only to see Michael standing there in a formal suit. He was wearing the suit we had chosen earlier, which made him look particularly dashing. To me, everything felt quite ironic. When Michael saw me with my messy hair and dressed in a wedding gown, without even any makeup on, his expression changed immediately. He questioned me, "Rebecca Tong, what on earth are you doing?" His shout jolted me a bit, and I frowned, but before I could respond, more words followed. "Do you have any idea how much grievance I suffered today?" With a furious roar, he made my headache even worse, and his tone turned unfriendly. "It's better to face embarrassment now than to deal with trouble later." Michael seemed to have never seen me speak like this before. His eyes widened as he asked, "What did you say? Are you saying that we will have an unsettled life after getting married? If you have felt this way for a long time, why didn't you tell me earlier? Now you say you don't want to continue. Is this some kind of game?" I sighed softly, feeling helpless in the face of his loud voice, showing no concern for the onlookers around us. Am I really the only one who feels uneasy about this? I won't directly mention the issue between you and Sarah. Michael, please don't be so impolite. The neighbors can hear us. Can you at least save some face for yourself? Michael's expression changed slightly. He began to avoid eye contact and quickly shifted the topic. "We need to focus on the wedding first. All our relatives and friends are here. Do you want to embarrass my parents?" I firmly refused and prepared to close the door, but Michael stopped me and clenched his teeth, saying, "It's my parents who want to talk to you." When I heard him mention his parents, I felt a twinge of guilt. After all, Michael's parents had treated me very well, like their own daughter. Unfortunately, Michael betrayed that trust. Today, I called off the wedding, which embarrassed them. Michael has truly been disappointing. I said, "Okay, just wait a moment." Without waiting for his response, I slammed the door shut. After finishing my personal care, when I opened the door again, I couldn't help but find it amusing to see his angry yet helpless expression. By the time I arrived at the scene, most of the guests had already left, leaving only a few acquaintances from the Sue family. When they saw me, several aunts started to criticize me. "Rebecca, oh, your stubbornness should have its limits. How can you say you're not getting married just like that for such a significant matter? Rebecca, what are we supposed to do now that you suddenly decided not to come? Big sister, third sister." Michael's mother blocked a few people and, still wearing a gentle expression, instructed Michael to take me into the private room to avoid being talked about by relatives outside. Inside the room, when Michael's father saw me arrive, he quickly stood up and anxiously patted his thigh. "Rebecca, you need to communicate well with your uncle and aunt. If you have any complaints, just let them know. Why aren't you answering their calls? Everything can be talked about." Michael's mother had us sit down and then sighed softly, saying, "Rebecca, your uncle is right. If you feel wronged, just tell your aunt. You're about to walk through the door, and your aunt has always treated you like her own daughter." As I looked at Michael's parents, I felt even more guilty in my heart. They have really treated me well, and the common mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflicts seen online have hardly occurred between me and Michael's mother. However, I have now made up my mind and do not intend to try to salvage the situation anymore. I bit my lip and shook my head. "Uncle and aunt, it's not that I'm dissatisfied because of the wedding." After saying this, I glanced at Michael. He sat there in silence, his expression even colder now. Michael's mother glanced over and realized it was Michael's problem, letting out a sigh. "Michael, did you upset Rebecca? How could I ever dare to upset her?" Michael looked up, and since he wouldn't admit it or bring it up himself, I sighed, unsure of how to approach the situation. At that moment, there was a knock on the door, and it was pushed open. Sarah, dressed elegantly and holding a gift, walked in on her high heels as if she didn't see me. She began with a prepared congratulatory message, "Uncle and Aunt, I'm late. Congratulations to Mr. Sue on his wedding." When she turned around and saw me, she was taken aback. "Oh, my sister-in-law is here too." Sarah forced a smile and tried to greet me in a casual tone. A hint of irony welled up inside me. After all, I was the main character at this wedding, making her words seem particularly unnecessary. I felt like I shouldn't be here. So who should be? "Is it Sarah?" Sarah walked over, and as she greeted me, I noticed the ring on her ring finger. A wave of unease washed over me. I then turned to look at Michael and found that he was also wearing the same ring. This scene was undoubtedly mocking me. At my wedding, I discovered that my husband and his secretary were wearing matching rings. No wonder he had always refused to wear a wedding band. It turns out this was the reason. Just think about it, if I had no idea and went ahead with the marriage, during the ring exchange, he would have to take off the ring he had for Sarah beforehand. Would he really feel okay with that? Is this our wedding, or is it hers? I tried to suppress my inner anger and stayed silent. Michael's father and mother noticed that the atmosphere had shifted. Michael's mother quickly urged us to eat, suggesting that we could address any issues after we were full. I wanted to explain things clearly and leave quickly, but I felt guilty and didn't want to put Michael's mother in a difficult position. So, we all sat down to wait for the dishes to be served. Once the food arrived, Michael's mother busily helped me with my portions, not asking why I hadn't attended the wedding, but instead enthusiastically saying, "This is delicious, and that one is great too. This is the signature dish. Do you want me to help you peel the shrimp?" she asked. I responded that it wasn't necessary, but I couldn't help but glance over at Michael. He was sitting next to Sarah, engaged in a lively conversation with her, and his expression was much warmer than it had been earlier. Sarah smiled softly, completely unconcerned about my presence or that of her parents. At that moment, Michael's father nudged Michael with his elbow, and he finally realized that he might have gone overboard. Reluctantly, he turned to me and offered a piece of crab. I looked at the crab, then at Michael, feeling helpless. Today was the first day of my period, and it wasn't suitable for me to eat crab, but he seemed to have completely forgotten about that. I silently discarded the crab, and both Michael's father and mother noticed. They couldn't help but glance at Michael. At that moment, I noticed that Sarah's bowl was already piled high with food, and Michael was still peeling shrimp for her. Clearly, these shrimp weren't for me. I didn't want to delay any longer, so I wiped my mouth, stood up, and said, I'm sorry, but I think we've eaten enough. Michael and I are officially breaking up, and I will share the costs of the wedding with him. As soon as I finished speaking, Michael fixed me with a stern gaze. Sarah suddenly stood up, anxiously asking, What's going on, sister-in-law? Why has the wedding been called off? Is there some kind of misunderstanding? I looked at her insincere expression and felt a wave of annoyance wash over me. So, I walked up to her, looked her straight in the eyes, and coldly said, Is that so? You don't know why I don't want to get married? A hint of provocation flashed in Sarah's eyes, and then she feigned innocence as she continued, What are you talking about, sister-in-law? How would I know? Smack! I couldn't hold back any longer and slapped her, coldly asking, Are you asking on purpose? Rebecca, what are you doing? Michael immediately rushed over, placing himself protectively behind Sarah. With tears in her eyes, Sarah couldn't help but sob. How could you hit someone? Michael saw her crying and angrily wanted to step forward. Rebecca, you've gone too far. No matter what, you can't resort to violence. That's enough. Michael! Michael's father suddenly coughed and held on to Michael. Seeing this, Michael's mother immediately interjected, Sarah, please step outside. This is a family matter. Even though you are Michael's secretary and friend, we would like you to leave for now. Sarah glanced at Michael's mother and father, stomped her foot in anger, and walked out. Michael continues to be relentless with me. Rebecca, how dare you hit my secretary? You've really overstepped. Not only did you run away from the wedding, but your attitude is also far too arrogant. Fortunately, I didn't marry someone like you. Anyone who did would be incredibly unfortunate. Michael, that's enough. Michael's mother scolded, but Michael seemed not to hear and continued, You want to marry me now? I'm not planning to get married. I found this utterly ridiculous, and since he felt that way, I had no reason to give him any face. Do you still want to get married now? I never realized you were so good at boasting, Michael. Michael's eyes widened in surprise, and I slammed my hand on the table, saying, How dare you say that about me? Whoever marries you is really in for bad luck. Which bride would find someone else's underwear on the bed the day before their wedding? That's not mine, right, Michael? How could I not know you were so unfaithful before? Playing around even on the wedding bed. Do you have no shame? This is just too much. We're getting married tomorrow. As soon as I finished speaking, Michael was taken aback. He hadn't expected that he had been exposed. He could only stammer. What did you say? I scoffed and, under the astonished gaze of Michael's parents, continued, And about your overtime, which company is it? Does the overtime really extend to the hotel bathroom? And you even had your female secretary pass you a towel. Do you think I don't know, Michael? How do you know it isn't? I was indeed at the gym that day. Michael was momentarily taken aback and began to instinctively defend himself, but before he could finish his sentence, he was interrupted by Michael's father. Slap! You ungrateful child! Michael's father angrily slapped him, clutching his chest in a fit of rage. I felt wronged, tears welling up in my eyes. Thinking back on our years together, everything seemed to have changed in an instant. How could he say that I didn't care? Michael believed he was doing well, unaware that I had been enduring so much over the years. Every time he came home late from work, the lipstick stains on his collar and the names he called out while drunk, how could I possibly not notice? I always thought there was still some feelings between us and that it wouldn't come to this point. I just felt he was being confused for a moment. Michael was stunned, angrily covering his face, ready to come back. I took a glass of wine and splashed it on his face, then said to Michael's parents, I'm sorry, uncle and aunt. It's my fault for running away from the wedding, and I didn't want things to end up like this. I'm truly sorry for what happened. After saying that, I turned and left. As I opened the door to the private room, I ran into Sarah at the corner. She was originally smoking by the window and, upon seeing someone approach, was about to extinguish her cigarette. When she realized it was me, she casually continued to smoke. Then, she looked me up and down. I crossed my arms and waited for Sarah to speak. After finishing her cigarette, she finally said something, pointing to her face and laughing triumphantly. She felt that if I got hit, Michael would like me even more. Rebecca, you lost today. You'll never be able to have anything to do with the Sue family for the rest of your life. This statement took me by surprise, and then I found it amusing, unable to hold back a laugh. You think I want to climb the social ladder? Isn't that the case? Sarah asked me back in confusion. I didn't respond immediately, but I nodded in understanding. Now I completely understood why she was so desperate to break me and Michael apart. It turned out that she wanted to get closer to Michael, using his wealth and status to elevate herself. To achieve this goal, she tempted Michael and even deliberately left that lace underwear on our bed to create a misunderstanding and exclude me. Thinking about this made me want to laugh. She thought that by pushing me away, she could easily take my place. How naive of her. She doesn't understand Michael, nor does she grasp the current situation. Sarah, you're thinking too simply, I said coldly, my tone laced with disdain and sarcasm. After I finished speaking, I turned and walked away. The next day, as I was about to leave, I opened the door and saw Michael. He had clearly been waiting for a long time, and he didn't ring the doorbell for fear of disturbing me. At that moment, he was no longer the arrogant person he had been yesterday. His face was filled with guilt. I raised an eyebrow and looked at him, but I didn't feel any sympathy in my heart. I was wrong yesterday. I was too impulsive. Can we talk? Please give me a chance to explain, Michael said softly, wanting to salvage the relationship. I was about to close the door, but he blocked it with his hand. He said eagerly, I really don't have a substantial relationship with Sarah. Do you believe me? Really? I replied coldly, having lost any concern for the answer to that question in my heart. Since our current relationship no longer matters, his attitude yesterday allowed me to see his true self completely. Michael is not a man worthy of my lifelong trust. Even if he and Sarah had nothing going on, I still wouldn't choose him as my husband. I have seen through his true nature. In fact, I should be grateful for this incident, as it allowed me to fully understand the real character of the person I once shared my bed with. However, I was surprised by Michael's apology. When we were still in love, I was always the one to back down first after every argument. Michael is a man with a strong sense of pride who usually won't take the initiative to back down. I have feelings for him, and over the years, I have been quite tolerant, even though I don't have the best temper myself. Now, it seems he has noticed my determination to break up and has started to apologize to me. However, his apologies are coming too late for me to accept. When he saw me hesitating to close the door, Michael continued to speak up. Can't we start over? I really like you and want to marry you. We've come this far. Can you bear to give up? What about Sarah? I looked at him coldly and asked, what does that have to do with her? Michael was taken aback for a moment and then sighed, wanting to change the subject. He wanted to explain, but I had no interest in hearing his insincere words. I directly exposed his intentions. You don't care about feelings. You're actually scared of me, aren't you, Michael? You fear that I will take back control of the company, which is why you came here to apologize. Michael was stunned, his face turning as red as if he had been hit in a sensitive spot, yet he still insisted on denying it. Of course not. What do you take me for? Don't you just want to take control of the company? I replied coldly. Let me tell you, Michael, we can't be together anymore. I'm here to reclaim my rights. Upon hearing this, Michael's face instantly turned pale. Why are you so anxious? You've only been at the company for 2 years, and you think it's yours now? I let out a cold laugh, my eyes filled with sarcasm and disdain. Seeing the look of shock on Michael's face brought me a sense of satisfaction. When my parents passed away unexpectedly, I inherited the family business. Michael, I entrusted the company to you because I believed in you. As for the shares, you should be aware that you are merely acting as an operator, right? The true owner of the company is me, Rebecca. Every word I say is like a needle, directly pricking at Michael's sore spots. With every word I utter, Michael's face grows paler, and he softly pleads, Rebecca, I really know I've made a mistake. Do you really think I don't have a temper? I scolded. You still dare to look for a mistress? You actually say that nothing substantial has happened between you two? Do you really believe that? Your home has turned into your dating spot. It's simply absurd. Upon hearing my words, Michael's face flushed from red to pale. He gritted his teeth, seemingly wanting to say something, yet he didn't know how to start. I didn't have time to hear his excuses. How could he possibly claim that they went to a hotel and nothing happened? I pushed him aside and went downstairs to drive to the office. In the car, I opened WeChat for work and sent a message in the shareholders group, meeting at 9:10. Then I accelerated towards the company. As soon as I walked in, I saw Sarah wearing a sexy form-fitting dress. When she noticed my arrival, she assumed I was there to confront Michael and immediately put on a strong demeanor. "Rebecca, I truly underestimated your shamelessness, daring to come to the office. This is not a place for you," she shouted, trying to intimidate me. I ignored her and prepared to head straight upstairs. I didn't expect her to block me even more seriously. "What do you want to do? I warn you, don't bother Michael anymore," Sarah said angrily. I pushed her aside and walked upstairs with a blank expression. Sarah immediately called the security guard, but I paid no attention and walked straight to the meeting room on the 3rd floor. I pushed open the glass door, and the shareholders inside looked surprised, with the security guard following me in. One shareholder asked who I was and how I dared to barge in. I didn't wait for him to finish his question before sitting down in the main seat at the conference table. That position was rightfully mine. When Sarah arrived, she saw me sitting there and sneered, "What do you think you are? Do you really think you belong in that position? You still want to interfere after the divorce?" Michael rushed in, out of breath, and sternly shouted, "Shut up." Sarah was taken aback, clearly not expecting Michael to react to her in that way. She looked at him with confusion, her eyes filled with uncertainty. At that moment, the shareholders around the conference table gradually regained their composure and began to ask me questions. "Ms. Tong, why did you come in person for the meeting today? Is there an urgent matter that requires an impromptu meeting?" Sarah widened her eyes, displaying a look of shock, as if she had stumbled upon a hidden issue. She glanced at me and then at Michael, seemingly in disbelief at what was happening. Michael, on the other hand, stood helplessly to the side, his expression not looking good. Facing the gazes of everyone present, I spoke decisively. "I have called everyone here today to remove Michael from all his positions." My voice was firm and unequivocal. The surrounding shareholders were taken aback for a moment, then they nodded in agreement one after another. I smiled at the astonished Sarah and continued speaking. "Old Wu, please inform HR to dismiss Sarah. Our company does not need employees like her." After her initial surprise, Sarah appeared skeptical, a hint of sarcasm tugging at the corners of her mouth, as if she doubted whether I truly had the authority to do that. Just as she was about to retort, Michael shot her a glance that silenced her. Michael turned to me with a forced smile and said, "Rebecca, it doesn't have to come to this." His tone carried a hint of pleading, as if he wanted to salvage some dignity. I looked at him with a cold expression and said bluntly, "Michael, I'm not joking. You should have thought about this long before you got together with Sarah. People need to have self-awareness. Don't think that just because you've helped me manage the company for 2 years, it all belongs to you now. I can give it to you, and I can take it back." Sarah understood that the company did not belong to Michael. She looked at Michael and questioned, "The company isn't yours? Are you lying to me?" Michael frowned, sighed, and attempted to make one last explanation. "Rebecca, I hope you will seriously consider restoring my position. Don't let a moment of impulsiveness affect the company's future development." I leaned back in the boss's chair and rejected it without hesitation. Michael saw this and his expression instantly darkened. He threatened, "I am an executive at the company. Do you know how much I've accomplished for the company in the past 2 years? How can the company function if you fire me?" I couldn't help but laugh. Propping my chin on my hand, I said, "Michael, you don't really think you're irreplaceable, do you?" He paused for a moment, frowned, and asked, "What do you mean?" I coldly replied, "No one is irreplaceable, not even you. Whether in relationships or work, I can always find someone more suitable to take your place. Do you understand?" I waved my hand to signal the security to escort them out, and the security immediately complied. When they left, Michael and Sarah went from being close to arguing and blaming each other. "Didn't you say the company was yours? How could you lie about that?" "This is mine, but right now, there's a misunderstanding. We're both unemployed. Can you please calm down, Sarah?" "Am I the one being calm? Wasn't it you who deceived me first? Stop talking. If it weren't for that incident at your wedding, none of this would have happened, right? Are you blaming me?" "Shut up." As their voices gradually faded away, I took the documents handed to me by my assistant and began to review the company's latest status. I picked up my pen and gestured for Project Manager Xiao Wang to begin his report. Xiao Wang, please start by updating us on the company's recent situation. Sure, Ms. Tong. After Xiao Wang respectfully answered, he provided a detailed report on the project's progress. Following that, the other shareholders took turns speaking, sharing updates on their respective projects. I listened patiently and gained a general understanding of the situation. Previously, I didn't want to get involved, but that didn't mean I couldn't manage things. Now that I am back in charge of the company, I realize that I initially refrained from intervening because I trusted Michael, but now I must take a hands-on approach. I didn't expect Michael to have such thick skin, daring to show up in front of me like this. It was truly a test of my patience. The next day at work, as soon as I opened the door, I saw him dressed as if for a first date, clearly having waited for a long time. He looked like a college student, holding flowers, standing in front of me with anticipation, softly calling my name. In that moment, I felt as if I had returned to the past, as the sunny, confident, and vibrant Michael appeared before me once again. It was as if the Michael who used to wait for me after class to go out for meals and watch movies was still there. Reality quickly calmed me down. Now, he seemed to exude an unbearable scent in my eyes, filling me with disgust. I slammed the door shut, shutting him out completely. No matter how much he pleaded, I remained unmoved. At that moment, his appearance only disappointed me regarding the wonderful memories we once shared. He left, looking lost and defeated, while I took a deep breath, trying to calm the turmoil within me. Not long after, I received a call from Michael's mother at the office. "Aunt, please come to the hospital. Michael was injured and admitted. He said he wouldn't cooperate with his treatment without you." On the other end of the line, Michael's mother's voice was filled with helplessness and guilt. I had no choice but to rush to the hospital. When I arrived, I learned what had happened. Michael found Sarah to retrieve something he had given her earlier, hoping to demonstrate his sincere apology. However, during their argument, he accidentally fell down the stairs, injuring himself, and was taken to the hospital. After examination, it was determined that he had a mild concussion and a fractured calf. I watched Michael, who appeared pale on the hospital bed, discussing treatment options with his mother, while his father went to get him some medication. Since earlier, Michael had wanted to talk to me, but I ignored him. At that moment, Sarah also arrived at the hospital. She looked somewhat anxious, and there was a complex mix of emotions in her eyes. She completely ignored my presence and directly said to Michael, "Michael, I know I was wrong. I really like you. I was too impulsive back then. Can you forgive me and give me another chance?" Sarah pleaded softly. A hint of struggle flashed in Michael's eyes as he looked at Sarah and then at me, seemingly contemplating something. In the end, he took a deep breath and firmly rejected Sarah. "No, I refuse." Sarah's expression immediately darkened, and she turned to glare at me with anger, her tone filled with resentment and unwillingness. "It's you, Rebecca. If it weren't for you causing trouble, I might have already been with Michael by now. What reason do you have to ruin our relationship? It's the one who isn't loved who is the third party. Who do you think you are to intervene?" Her words were not only malicious but also absurd, making her seem ridiculous. However, I simply looked at her coldly without answering her question. Instead, I suddenly asked Michael, "Michael, do you know why you were suddenly dismissed?" Michael was taken aback for a moment and said softly, "It's because of my situation with Sarah." "I'm sorry, Rebecca." His tone was filled with guilt and self-blame. I didn't respond to his feelings of guilt and self-reproach. I simply shook my head in denial. If that were the only reason, I would have removed you from your position as soon as I noticed the problem. I have always believed that as long as a management company is capable, it can perform well, and you, Michael, are indeed a capable person. The real reason is that Sarah's intentions in getting close to you are not genuine. Michael was taken aback by this and his eyes reddened. He glared at Sarah, as if realizing her true intentions for the first time. Angrily, he asked, "What? You approached me just for my power and money?" Michael asked, shocked and furious. Sarah was startled by his outburst and quickly explained, "No, that's not true. Michael, you have to believe me. I truly like you, not because of those other things. Rebecca, don't try to drive a wedge between us." However, everyone present found her explanation unconvincing. After all the evidence pointed to her being interested in Michael for money and power. Sarah, feeling cornered, suddenly lunged at me with a tone filled with madness and desperation. "Rebecca, don't think you've won." Sarah's madness surprised everyone. She pulled a sharp knife from her pocket and rushed towards me. Michael's mother, standing nearby, was taken aback. It took her a moment to comprehend the situation before she hurriedly tried to stop her. I quickly stepped back 2 paces, barely avoiding her attack. At the same time, I quickly grabbed the stool beside me, ready to protect myself in a critical moment. However, Sarah's attacks were exceptionally fierce. She kept advancing, cornering me against the wall. With a cold smile, she approached me, holding a dagger, and the sharp blade made my heart race. A momentary dodge might not be enough to escape the next strike. Just at that crucial moment, Michael suddenly intervened. He grabbed the phone next to him and threw it, hitting Sarah squarely on the back of the head. Sarah swayed slightly, and the dagger in her hand veered off course. Seizing the opportunity, I quickly stepped forward and knocked the dagger from her grasp. Both sides were now in a standoff, the tension in the air almost palpable. Just then, Michael's father, who had gone to get some medicine, burst into the room, seized Sarah, and sternly scolded her. Michael's mother also stepped in to help and eventually managed to restrain Sarah. Seeing this, I sighed in relief, but I also felt a wave of fear wash over me. I quickly took out my phone to call the police. The officers arrived at the scene shortly afterward and immediately placed handcuffs on Sarah. "Let me go! Let go!" Sarah struggled to break free, but her resistance was futile. Michael was shaken by the thrilling scene they just witnessed. His phone, which he instinctively dropped, turned out to be crucial. Michael glanced at the detained Sarah and then turned to me. "Don't worry, Rebecca. The money Sarah has been siphoning from the company over the years will serve as evidence in the upcoming lawsuit," Michael said. Sarah, in disbelief, turned to Michael, pleading for mercy, but the people present showed no reaction to her pleas. Seeing that her begging was in vain, she began to curse, directing her anger from me to everyone around. In the end, Sarah was taken away by the police, and I was also ready to leave. At that moment, Michael suddenly called out to me, as if he had more to say. I turned around and locked eyes with him, but he eventually lowered his head. Michael's parents apologized to me and assured me that they would never let Michael appear in front of me again. I nodded in agreement and then turned to leave. That was also the last time I saw Michael and Sarah. The days that followed became long and busy, as the company operated smoothly under my management. However, managing the company was quite cumbersome, so I found a capable and trustworthy person to help me run it. As for me, I simply became an easygoing boss and started living a relaxed life. Later, I heard that Sarah was sentenced to several years for economic crimes, and Michael's family also left the city. These pieces of news were of little concern to me. After all, they were all part of the past, and I had already decided to start a new chapter in my life.